as far as Zombie release time frame, we're not going to be discussing that at this point. We have one in mind internally, but for the most part, we're still kind of working. And once we have something more solid, we'll be sure to share it with you guys.
Yeah, that'll basically be announced when it is announced.
Yep.
Okay, I'm back. Hi, everybody.
Dave, we got a question for you. So, the question is, editor updates with DLC, any details?
In terms of which, we don't change the editor in any way. It's really sort of stock.
Right, so I think he means like what capabilities for modders are going to be available from the DLC. What are we exposing for them? What can they do with infantry? Those type of things.
Well, all of that is going to be in blueprints. So I don't think that we're actually changing the underlying. The underlying C++ core now is pretty stable. We have some changes to do with DLC and stuff like that, but most of the capabilities we're adding now are all being layered on top of it. So most of the stuff, if not the majority or all of it, is going to be happening in blueprints. So I'll also entertain questions here in terms of, it's not just downloadable content, but on terms of the changes that we'll have for unit selection and the spawning as well.
Oh, actually, Dave, I actually have a question that came up in the podcast that I wasn't able to answer with a certainty. The infantry that's coming up, is that going to be part of the free update, or is that going to be paid DLC?
I actually don't know offhand. I really don't know. It's pretty well integrated into stuff, and it really brings stuff alive. So, yeah, I don't know, I'm afraid. It's all Alexander Garden's stuff.
Okay, yeah. In the podcast, I was leaning towards a yes, but I told him not to quote me on it just because I wasn't absolutely sure, because since that stuff will eventually touch pretty much everything, as far as how they appear in pretty much all the other proc missions and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure how we would exclude it from DLC, because that requires an awful lot of effort. So, but again, don't quote me on that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, for any new assets going to the procedural system beyond the new biome. So yes, there will be new garrisons and new tiles. So we're sort of expanding on the stuff that's in there.
What about Astro's question? What about the new weapons like rifles and chem lasers? Will enemies have fixed variants, or will it be more random enemy variants with unique loadouts instead of stock only?
So on that front, there will be new variants that have the new weapons and whatnot. But as far as mixing them beyond stock, that is, we wouldn't really have the capabilities of having them just provide almost random armaments per everything. The entire system is set up around pretty much drawing from the unit cards themselves. So there wouldn't really necessarily be like any kind of overhaul to the system to make that random, but we will be introducing new variants that will come with the new weapons. A lot of them are going to be DLC exclusive variants, so you will only get to see them if you own the DLC.
Yeah, we can't really. Actually, we could probably roll them fresh every time, but no, I think that would be basically because we're looking at battle value, and if the changing the weapons up could vastly change the battle value of the thing, so we're not going to do it that. We wouldn't be doing it on the fly like that. We want to sort of roll everything beforehand, get a good idea of what you're going to be up against, and restricted to that.
Yes, so I just heard from Kerry Whalen, and he says that yes, you can post that infantry are part of the free update, so that's cool.
Okay.
Yay!
Excellent. Well, that streamlines our work as well.
So, Caboodles, any chance of pre-damaged units? Any chance of pre-damaged units having more randomized levels of damage? It's weird seeing mechs only being pristine or zero armor and red internals everywhere. Certainly there is that. This is actually not done in blueprints, so I will make a note of that and have a look at the damage the way things are damaged. So
Let me go back to LT47 as well. I wouldn't say that there's anything missing as far as the sound, at least to my knowledge. If there is missing sound, that would probably be a bug. But there are going to be some. We're working on some new Bitching Betty stuff, but I'm not entirely sure. Like that's still kind of like in production, so we're not really ready to commit to it at this point in time. But we are playing around with some additional stuff internally. Oh, okay. So yes. So LT47 asks, any sound update coming with the DLC? Some events have none, like Mech Critical Explosion or Missing Betty sounds. I think the Critical Explosion already has a sound associated with it, but I can always bring that up with our sound engineers. As far as the Bitching Betty stuff, that stuff is... we have some stuff that we're looking into internally for Bitching Betty, but we're not ready to really commit to it at this point in time. So just stay tuned on that front.
Okay, the question is, are we planning any patches prior to the DLC free update? That's not really information we're discussing at this Q&A. That would really be up to production.
Yeah, that would be more of a carry question. This is mostly in regards to either the free update that's going to coincide with the DLC 1 release or DLC 1 release itself. So
Aster, regarding Warzone, any known improvements, changes for existing mission types, except infantry? Warzone kind of feels not like a real Warzone if there's often just 1 to 2 allies roaming around. So, one side effect of revamping the unit selection is that we're, Chris mostly, is going to have to go through and retune these things. I have a list of sort of things that are in with Warzone, so we're going to be looking at this stuff and trying to improve it. So hopefully, yes.
Yeah, Warzone is definitely something that I'll be looking at in particular. And as Dave said, with everything being retuned, it means that we're going to have to relook at the existing way that we kind of construct missions right now.
Yeah, we're going to have actually a lot more control over how the units show up and their distribution. So already, with the changes I've made, you're not seeing like lots and lots of locusts are running around or cicadas running around. It's much better distributed.
Yeah, if you guys check out the video playthrough on the podcast and do kind of a count on all the mechs, you can notice that there's pretty much lots of heavies and assaults in there. There's like a Zeus, some heavies, some mediums, and only like a few number of lights in there. So we are looking at ways to kind of vary the distribution a bit more.
And not that you guys really care. Also, unit selection has been really optimized. So in Warzone, it was taking a significant proportion of the time to calculate the mission to actually select the units, and that's been streamlined down to almost nothing now.
Yeah, well, Warzone is almost like perpetually infinite, number of waves potentially, so, or almost infinite.
So Nabi, any chance of more variety in turrets and tournament armaments, especially turrets with multiple types of weapons?
So turrets is something we have to be very careful about because there are a lot of potential turret spawns, and the system is fairly indiscriminate as far as where you populate the turrets. We do have some large laser turrets and some bigger weapon turrets out there, but there's a few things that we have to kind of watch out for because there's so many turret spawns. We don't really have that much control, like in the procedural sense of like where exactly those turrets are going to spawn. So you could find yourself putting like a large laser or an AC-20 turret in the middle of a city and, really not be able to tell where it's going to spawn. And also the battle value concern is that if we start kind of pumping more battle value into the turret spawning system in order to get those bigger, badder turrets, it also means that there's the potential that you will find a lot more turrets around in general. And turrets, as we kind of want them to not necessarily be that big of a threat, only because they can get pretty overwhelming if they just completely try to spawn at every single spawn point in some of these garrisons.
Yeah, I've already really tuned down the number of turrets that are showing up. So I mean, it would be nice to have a wider variety. We'll have to see. We'll have to look at that in context of our overall tuning.
Yeah, like David, maybe with these new spawn changes, we can revisit this because like the main thing that was holding this up before was that if we pumped more battle value into the turrets, to get those larger turret types, we would often find that you would get one or two of like the larger turret types, but the rest of the turrets just got all the battle value got put into small laser turrets, medium laser turrets, but they just populated at obscene levels throughout all of the garrisons because there's a lot of potential spawn points for those things. So.
And that was one of the major changes that occurred. The way that the unit selection used to work is that it would try and allocate the big things first, and then it would use up any remaining battle value with smaller units. And that's why we ended up getting a lot of turrets, because the turrets are very light and they would soak up all this extra battle value. So instead of doing that now, we retain that unused battle value for the next round or for the next garrison or something like this, so that again it gets used to be using larger units. So the way it is now, there's very few turrets. Again, right now, this is when I say now, I mean work in progress on my local machine. There's actually not enough turrets showing up. So again, this will be all part of our overall pass in game tuning. What's going to happen?
Yeah, we'll look into it, but there's a reason why it's tuned the way it is right now, and with these new changes to how we basically factor in unit selection, we might be able to introduce more heavily armed turrets. But that's also something that I almost would ask you guys to maybe talk about in the community, because more turrets, it might vary up the engagements a bit, but at the same time it also can be a point of frustration for some players that we found at least in testing.
And I guess maybe you'd have to balance that against the infantry also being present as well, right?
We'd have to balance it against everything, because the system runs on effectively a battle value system where pretty much at certain difficulty levels, we have a set allocation of battle value per garrison and stuff like that. So if you have a garrison with much more battle value, some of it will distribute to turrets, some of it will be distributed to mechs that are guarding the garrisons and vehicles and infantry. Like pretty much everything kind of comes down to how much of that is assigned and how we can divvy that up. So it's entirely possible for us to play around with those values. It just comes down to tuning after we get all of these kind of under the hood changes to how the selection gets made.
Any significant changes to the market system beyond adding the new equipment and weapons?
So this is something I can take. You're going to have to elaborate on significant changes, because we do have some changes with the market system coming in. There were a number of bugs that we found on release that we kind of attacked. Like, for example, the rare and hero mechs were kind of coming in at set prices when they should be influenced by your allegiance to whatever the market is. So that way, if you're, pretty much racking up experience in Davian space, you should get discounts on hero mechs and rare mechs to put them a little bit more closer to where things are. We also found a bug that standard mechs were kind of getting a double discount through the damage system, depending on how damaged they were. So really damaged mechs came in at pretty dirt cheap prices, a lot lower than what we initially wanted. So that's going to be fixed up, and then for DLC only people, there is going to be a significant change because the DLC introduces a lot of mech equipment that is lost tech. So stuff like mask, stuff like ECM, BAP, all of that stuff is not necessarily going to be readily available in the stores when you first started out. And so what we had to create was similar to how there's the rare weapon system right now. For DLC owners, there's going to be a new rare equipment tag. So you could basically go and potentially find some of the equipment that is associated with the DLC. But probably most exciting for players is that you're also this rare equipment tag could also potentially pertain to double heat sinks being available in the market prior to their reintroduction date. And then past that, there's also going to be like I kind of alluded to in the podcast, the chemical lasers, the mech rifles, and the superchargers are not really weapons and equipment that the house armies tend to use. So there is going to be additional market changes that means that those things will probably be things that you're going to need to track down outside of the industrial zones to find. So you'll have to find them pretty much in war zones and black markets and outside the gaze of pretty much the great houses.
Okay, LT-47. Any change to the spawning distance and the problem of leopard dropping enemy on your objective in the defense mission? It does seem like you're getting dropped inside the defense garrison, the garrison you're defending, in that mission type more than it should be. We set the percentage, and looking at what the experience is to what that percentage drop, there seems to be a disconnect there. So again, I'll be looking at that. The spawning distance, I don't know whether you mean that overall or just in defense. And I think the issue there is it just doesn't have enough places to drop stuff. And again, that's on my list of stuff to look at. So, and that'll all be part of our overall tuning and looking at these things as well. The other thing about the enemy leopard dropping enemy, or the leopard sort of dropping things off and people sort of getting surprised from it, is we are making differences to the sequence of the dropship coming in. So we're extending it a little bit. We're putting a little bit more of a delay on how long it hovers there before it drops them. And the dropship isn't going to be able to sneak up on you anymore. I mean, I noticed this in the game as well, that the dropship could be right behind me and I wouldn't notice it until I turned around and there would be a couple of mechs there. So we're changing the dropship so that your situational awareness in terms of camera shake, in terms of noise, in terms of ground effects, and in terms of timing and the appearance on the mini-map and your radar will make it far less likely for you to get surprised by these things coming in. So even though the spawning distance may not change, your perception and your ability to deal with it will improve.
Okay, Aster asks, any info on jump jet AI usage or AI improvements in vanilla? Did you guys get some inspiration from the AITT rules mod? We've passed the AITT rules mod on to the development team, so they're reviewing it. But as to any improvement that is outside of what Dave and I could probably comment on at this moment, unless Dave, you have some information that I don't.
We don't know what's going on with that or what the actual schedule is, but certainly AI improvements is something that everybody's clamoring for. So,
yeah, and that fact is aware. Yeah, we're aware of that desire, but it's out of our individual hands. So,
yeah, we can't comment with any authority whatsoever here.
Exactly. So melee weapons, or can we use melee weapons? We have no plans for that at the moment. There's a lot of things that would have to be considered in order to implement something like that. And I mean,
it's just a huge, 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 huge feature.
Yes.
Unbelievably huge, beyond what you could possibly imagine that it would do to take this, let alone this difference in sizes, timing, user interface, balancing. It's just...
Well, even like if you put through all of like the technical restrictions to get something like that in, balancing it to be fun with it in the controls of a mech simulator where you pretty much have a throttle and everything like that is also going to be incredibly challenging to pretty much not just to get it implemented, but also make it fun within the context of what we're doing here. So never say never. I mean, designers always love a challenge, and they always love, getting people what they want. But at the same time, it's something that we're currently not exploring at the present moment.
We did think at some point, like the only thing that could possibly be within sort of scope is to have something that charges ahead, and you charge something and try to knock it over. But we're not considering that. That's not DLC. It's not something we're looking at right now. But if a modder is out there and thinking what they want to do, I think anybody that's looked at it has realized what a massive job it would be. So if there's anybody that wants to look at modding, looking at like a charge key that takes 3 or 4 steps fast forward and tries to knock things over. But like that's not going to happen with us.
That's the thing. Even knocking things over would require us to create knockdown mechanics in general.
Knockdown animations. What happens when you knock into something that building?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've seen how difficult ragdoll stuff is. So if we now have stand-up animations, what happens if you're a stand-up animation? You're inside a building or an object or a rock, and there's something right there. It's just.
Am I correct in remembering that we added some form of mech impact damage, though?
Yes, I think there is some.
Yeah.
Especially if you're landing from on
in
top.
a way, there is collision damage caused by one mech running into another mech, potentially for, I don't want to say DFA, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not going to be. It's tuned to not be that evasive, only because we don't want to. Because it's driven by the physics engine, we don't want it to get into situations where you're running in a locust, you collide with a mech, and then all of a sudden you've pretty much sheared off half of your mech. So it's definitely there, but it has been balanced to be a little bit more on the forgiving side and keep the focus more on the gunplay, just because it's going to be very easy to pretty much get into situations where those lighter mechs will accidentally, through just the complex controls of even just controlling a mech, collide in with the side of an object or collide in with an atlas or a heavier mech moving towards them, and just see half of their mech evaporate if it's not tuned to pretty much be a bit on the forgiving side.
Okay.
So I'll answer the question that LT47 is asking. Is there going to be unique starts to the career mode and character creation? Character creation, no, but unique starts in career mode, yes. So for the most part, your character is still going to remain pretty much how it is in campaign, but as far as the actual starts, when you start a career, you have the option of pretty much picking where you pick off in the universe, and you will be getting a unique starting lance and starting conditions for each house that you can potentially start your adventure in.
So caboodles, could we get unit spawning buildings during raids and base attack missions? It would make sense for vehicle hangars to scramble a limited amount of vehicles, tanks, and aircraft. We've done some preliminary stuff on this, but it changes. I mean, you guys would be complaining about being spammed, and the units even more so if we did that. But this is not. This isn't high on our list of things at the moment.
So, Tom, in the new campaign, we get to import our old Merc outfit, or we get to create our own new one. Any info on some of the customization of creating a new Merc outfit, coloring your dropship, changing your Merc emblem? When you start a new career, you will be able to change your Merc emblem. And even in campaign mode, if you go back, I think that there will be some kind of UI to change the emblem when you're initially setting up your Merc outfit.
Generic meds, is the DLC going to kill all mods made before until the end of time? Why would we want to do that?
I think what he's meaning is, will the DLC pretty much break all the mods that are out there?
Well, until the end of time, I mean, it may break some, and people will have to fix them, but this is just the nature of the beast.
Ultimately, it should benefit the modding community, really. I mean, all the new features and content we're adding in is, a lot of it's added to be moddable. Like, Chris, you were talking about the timeline feature in the NGNG podcast.
Yeah,
that's a moddable feature. So I think that we're adding as much to the game as possible and empowering the mod makers at the same time. Because
and just to kind of clarify, I think it all comes down to the individual DLC and what systems it touches. I mean, obviously, if you basically have a DLC that affects spawn points and stuff like that. I imagine that the work that Dave is doing with changing the entire spawning system is going to affect those DLCs a lot more than those that don't affect or don't touch those kind of systems.
I'm not too Generic Beds keeps asking sort of like sound and things like this and animations of explosions. Those are all assets. So they tend to pull it from a bank of things. So sound ones may be less likely to be affected, but again, I'm not really up on that part of the actual work.
It's impossible for us to really tell which ones will work and which ones will get broken because we really don't have the time to comb through every single mod and see what kind of individual systems they touch. So we're here to empower the mods, but at the same time, we just can't anticipate what will be affected by our changes. So LT47, any information on the quirking system? So have you seen the podcast with Phil? Because we basically went into the quirking system as well as its relationship with the incoming job system for the DLC. Given the time frame and how we're a little bit over time, I would say just check out the podcast. We talk about it for a little bit, and that's about all the info that we can get on the matter at this point in time. So my internet still sucks. Will there be ECM and similar techs in MechWarrior 5? Yes, that tech is coming with DLC 1. If you guys haven't checked out the DLC page, Matt, I guess you can link to the DLC, but ECM, BAP, mask, and a whole lot of other equipment will be coming with DLC 1. So Karen asks, is it possible to have service available in Japanese? That is, we wouldn't be able to answer that. It comes down to, that'd be a question for us and what languages we would like to localize this game into. I'd love to get it into that market though, but okay.
A kind of ballpark percentage you guys are looking at for the damaged soldiers would be deal to your mechs on a map, say 1 to 5%. That's from Tomahawk. We haven't started looking at the balance stuff for that. It's definitely a case where a bunch of soldiers could affect this. So Chris and others will actually be looking at this in quite a bit of detail, but we don't have any answers yet.
Yeah, that's I think still open to interpretation internally because the main focus is the mechs, and I'm not sure if you caught pretty much the if you caught the podcast where we showed some video of the infantry pretty much in there defending various installations and stuff like that. But no matter how we can justify it, infantry aren't going to be running around at 60 kph, similar to how many of the mechs are moving. So it's a question of, do you really want those ankle biters to do significant damage, or is that just going to be a very unfun prospect to basically have a mech that's pretty critically damaged as they come up on like an objective raid or something, and then dive into a pool of infantry just to get shot down. So we're not ruling anything out at the moment, but we are definitely, it is up for internal discussion at the moment.
Hiring aerotech pilots for air support. Chris, is there any feature like that?
As far as I know, we're not looking at that at the moment, so don't count on that.
Yeah, outside the scope of DLC 1, but never say never for potential future updates. And Bolter, can you stomp infantry? Yes.
And you can burn them.
And I just got a comment from Carrie, who is listening to the podcast, Carrie Whalen, the producer. So we're talking now about how we can work with the modding community in advance of DLC launch to reduce the disruption as much as possible. It's an issue we care about, and it's important that the DLC and mods can work together. So we're trying to figure out how we can make sure the mods are working as much as possible. So when we release it, there isn't a huge disruption and in advance of releasing the DLC. So that's good news.
Yeah, the modding community is really important to us. So, and we're not going to try and stomp on anything that with any kind of intention. But of course, these are big, complex systems, and so we're not going to catch everything.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Dave. Any closing last things? Maybe you want to tell them what the biggest thing is for you guys, what you're most excited about the DLC. Chris, what's your favorite feature? The thing that you think you're going to play with the most once it's released?
I mean, the new authored missions are always fun, and even Beachhead is shaping up to, become very entertaining. So definitely the new game mode, as well as the new authored missions that are going to be coming with it.
Cool, Dave. How about you?
Well, for me, since I'm delving down in the guts of this thing, I'm deeply involved in the Beachhead one since I'm authoring that. Plus, I'm quite excited that I could go into the unit selection and sort of tear the whole thing out and revamp it and do it properly so that we have more control over what actually gets presented. So I'm looking to provide more variety. We're improving the spawning, we're improving the perception of getting spammed, and generally going to improve the game experience as far as that's going. So I'm excited about that. I think we've come a long way already, and we'll be even better by the time we release.
That sounds awesome, guys. Thanks a lot. And thank you, everyone who showed up and asked the awesome questions. I will get this up to YouTube as soon as I've had a chance to check the quality and maybe edit it a little bit. But thanks a lot for coming.
And
check
I'd also like to
Go ahead.
I'd also like to mention that we do look at the Discord channels, just not all the time because they're a real fire hose. But we are keeping a general eye out on things, so it's you're not just makes voices in the wilderness, but we can't answer everything. So thanks for all your contributions and your continued support of the game. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day, and maybe we'll do this again in the near future. We'll see. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Friday.
Bye, guys.